Section 21 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Li Jing. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1, by Cao Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bancroft Jolly. Chapter 9, Part 2. This person was, in fact, one whose name was Chia Se, a grandson likewise of a main branch of the Ning mansion. His parents had died at an early period, and he had, ever since his youth, lived with Chia Zhen. He had at this time grown to be 16 years of age, and was, as compared with Chia Rong, still more handsome and good-looking. These two cousins were united by ties of the closest intimacy, and were always together, whether they went out or stayed at home. The inmates of the Ning mansion were many in number, and their opinions of a mixed kind; and that whole bevy of servants, devoid as they were of all sense of right, solely excelled in the practice of inventing stories to backbite their masters. And this is how some mean person or other again, who it was is not known, insinuated slanderous and opprobrious reports against Chia Se. Chia Zhen had, presumably, also come to hear some unfavorable criticisms on his account, and having, of course, to save himself from odium and suspicion, he had, at this juncture, after all, to apportion him separate quarters, and to bid Chia Se move outside the Ning mansion, where he went and established a home of his own to live in. This Chia Se was handsome as far as external appearances went, and intelligent withal in his inward natural gifts, but though he nominally came to school, it was simply, however, as a mere blind. For he treated, as he had ever done, as legitimate occupations, such things as cock-fighting, dog-racing, and visiting places of easy virtue. And, as above, he had Chia Zhen to spoil him by over-indulgence, and below there was Chia Rong to stand by him, who of the clan could consequently presume to run counter to him? Seeing that he was on the closest terms of friendship with Chia Rong, how could he reconcile himself to the harsh treatment which he now saw Qin Zhong receive from some persons? Being now bent upon pushing himself forward to revenge the injustice, he was, for the time, giving himself up to communing with his own heart. Qin Zhong, Chia Rui, and the rest are, he pondered, friends of Uncle Hsüeh, but I too am on friendly terms with him, and he with me. And if I do come forward and they tell old Hsüeh, won't we impair the harmony which exists between us? And if I don't concern myself, such idle tales make, when spoken, every one feel uncomfortable. And why shouldn't I now devise some means to hold them in check, so as to stop their mouths as prevent any loss of face? Having concluded this train of thought, he also pretended that he had to go out, and, walking as far as the back, he with low voice called to his side Ming Yan, the page attending upon Pao-yü in his studies, and in one way and another he made use of several remarks to egg him on. This Ming Yan was the smartest of Pao-yü's attendants, but he was also young in years and lacked experience, so that he lent a patient ear to what Chia Se had to say about the way Chin Rong had insulted Qin Zhong. "Even your own master, Pao-yü," Chia Se added, "is involved, and if you don't let him know a bit of your mind, he will next time be still more arrogant." This Ming Yan was always ready, even with no valid excuse, to be insolent and overbearing to people, so that after hearing the news and being furthermore instigated by Chia Se, he speedily rushed into the schoolroom and cried out, "Chin Rong!" Nor did he address him as Mr. Chin, but merely shouted, "What kind of fellow is this called Chin?" Chia Se presently shuffled his feet, while he designedly adjusted his dress and looked at the rays of the sun. "It's time," he observed, and walking forthwith, first up to Chia Rui, he explained to him that he had something to attend to, and would like to get away a little early; and as Chia Rui did not venture to stop him, he had no alternative but to let him have his way and go. During this while, Ming Yan had entered the room and promptly seizing Chin Rong in a grip. "What we do, whether proper or improper," he said, "doesn't concern you. It's enough anyway that we don't defile your father. A fine brat you are indeed, to come out and meddle with your Mr. Ming!" These words plunged the scholars of the whole class in such consternation that they all wistfully and absently looked at him. "Ming Yan," hastily shouted out Chia Jui, "you are not to kick up a rumpus." Chin Jung was so full of anger that his face was quite yellow. "What a subversion of propriety! A slave and a menial to venture to behave in this manner! I'll just simply speak to your master," he exclaimed as he readily pushed his hands off and was about to go and lay hold of Pao-yü to beat him. Ch'in Chung was on the point of turning round to leave the room, when with the sound of whiff which reached him from behind, he at once caught sight of square inkslab come flying that way. Who had thrown it he could not say, but it struck the desk where Chia Lan and Chia Jun were seated. These two, Chia Lan and Chia Jun, were also the great grandsons of a close branch of the Jung mansion. This Chia Jun had been left fatherless at an early age, and his mother doted upon him in an unusual manner, and it was because at school he was on most friendly terms with Chia Lan that these two sat together at the same desk. Who would have believed that Chia Jun would, in spite of being young in years, have had an extremely strong mind, and that he would be mostly up to mischief without the least fear of any one? He watched with listless eye from his seat Chin Jung's friend stealthily assist Chin Jung as they flung an inkslab to strike Ming Yan, but when, as luck would have it, it hit the wrong mark, and fell just in front of him, smashing to atoms the porcelain inkslab and water bottle, and smudging his whole book with ink. Chia Jun was of course much incensed, and hastily gave way to abuse. "You consummate pugnacious criminal rowdies! Why, doesn't this amount to all of you taking a share in the fight?" And as he uttered this abuse, he too forthwith seized an inkslab which he was bent upon flinging. Chia Lan was one who always tried to avoid trouble, so that he lost no time in pressing down the inkslab, while with all the words his mouth would express, he tried to pacify him, adding, "My dear brother, it's no business of yours and mine." Chia Jun could not repress his resentment, and perceiving that the inkslab was held down, he at once laid hold of a box containing books, which he flung in this direction. But being, after all, short of stature and weak of strength, he was unable to send it anywhere near the mark, so that it dropped instead, when it got as far as the desk belonging to Pao-yü and Ch'in Chung, while a dreadful crash became audible as it fell smash on the table. The books, papers, pencils, inkslabs, and other writing materials were all scattered over the whole table, and Pao-yü's cup besides containing tea was itself broken to pieces, and the tea spilt. Chia Jun forthwith jumped forward with the intent of assailing the person who had flung the inkslab at the very moment that Chin Jung took hold of a long bamboo pole which was near by, but as the space was limited, and the pupils many, how could he very well brandish a long stick? Ming Yan at an early period received a whack, and he shouted wildly, "Don't you fellows yet come to start a fight?" Pao-yü had, besides, along with him several pages, one of whom was called Sao Hong, another Chu Yao, another Mo Yu. These three were naturally up to every mischief, so that with one voice, bawling boisterously, "You children of doubtful mothers, have you taken up arms?" Mo Yu promptly took up the bar of a door, while Sao Hong and Chu Yao both laid hold of horsewhips, and they all rushed forward like a hive of bees. Chia Jui was driven to a state of exasperation. Now he kept this one in check, and the next moment he reasoned with another, but who would listen to his words? They followed the bent of their inclinations, and stirred up a serious disturbance. Of the whole company of wayward young fellows, some there were who gave slight blows for fun's sake; others there were who were not gifted with much pluck, and hid themselves on one side; there were those too who stood on the tables, clapping their hands and laughing immoderately, shouting out, "Go at it!" The row was, at this stage, like water bubbling over in a cauldron, when several elderly servants like Li Gui and others, who stood outside, heard the uproar commence inside, and one and all came in with all haste and united in their efforts to pacify them. Upon asking, "What's the matter?" The whole bevy of voices shouted out different versions, this one giving this account, while another again another story. But Li Gui temporized by rebuking Ming Yen and others, 4 in all, and packing them off. Qin Zhong's head had, at an early period, come into contact with Jing Rong's pole and had had the skin grazed off. Pao-yü was in the act of rubbing it for him with the overlap of his coat, but realizing that the whole lot of them had been hushed up, he forthwith bade Li Gui to collect his books. "Bring my horse round," he cried. "I'm going to tell Mr. Chia Tai-ju that we have been insulted. I won't venture to tell him anything else, but tell him I will that having come with all propriety and made our report to Mr. Chia Jui, instead of helping us, threw the fault upon our shoulders; that while he heard people abuse us, he went so far as to instigate them to beat us; that Ming Yen, seeing others insult us, did naturally take our part, but that they, instead of desisting, combined together and struck Ming Yen and even broke open Qin Zhong's head; and that how is it possible for us to continue our studies in here?" "My dear sir," replied Li Gui coaxingly, "don't be so impatient. As Mr. Chia Tai-ju has had something to attend to and gone home, were you now, for a trifle like this, to go and disturb that aged gentleman, it will make us, indeed, appear as if we had no sense of propriety. My idea is that, wherever a thing takes place, there should it be settled, and what's the need of going and troubling an old man like him? This is all you, Mr. Chia Jui, who is to blame, for in the absence of Mr. Chia Tai-ju, you, sir, are the head in the school, and every one looks to you to take action. Had all the pupils been at fault, those who deserved a beating should have been beaten, and those who merited punishment should have been punished. And why did you wait until things came to such a pass, and didn't even exercise any check?" "I blew them up," pleaded Chia Jui, "but no one of them would listen." "I'll speak out whether you, worthy sir, resent what I'm going to say or not," ventured Li Gui. "It's you, sir, who all along have after all had considerable blame attached to your name, that's why all these young men wouldn't hear you. Now if this affair is bruited until it reaches Mr. Chia Tai-ju's ears, why even you, sir, will not be able to escape condemnation. And why don't you at once make up your mind to disentangle the ravelled mess, and dispel all trouble and have done with it?" "Disentangle what?" inquired Pao-yü. "I shall certainly go and make my report." "If Chin Jung stays here," interposed Qin Zhong sobbing, "I mean to go back home." "Why that?" asked Pao-yü. "Is it likely that others can safely come and that you and I can't? I feel it my bounden duty to tell every one everything at home so as to expel Chin Jung. This Chin Jung," he went on to inquire as he turned towards Li Gui, "is the relative or friend of what branch of the family?" Li Gui gave way to reflection and then said by way of reply, "There's no need whatever for you to raise this question, for were you to go and report the matter to the branch of the family to which he belongs, the harmony which should exist between cousins will be still more impaired." "He's the nephew of Mrs. Huang, of the Eastern mansion," interposed Ming Yen from outside the window. "What a determined and self-confident fellow he must be to even come and bully us! Mrs. Huang is his paternal aunt. That mother of yours is only good for tossing about like a millstone, for kneeling before our lady Lien, and begging for something to pawn. I've no eye for such a specimen of mistress." "What?" speedily shouted Li Gui. "Does this son of a dog happen to know of the existence of all these gnawing maggots?" These disparaging facts. Pao-yü gave a sardonic smile. "I was wondering whose relative he was," he remarked. "Is he really sister-in-law Huang's nephew? Well, I'll go at once and speak to her." As he uttered these words, his purpose was to start there and then, and he called Ming Yen in to come and pack up his books. Ming Yen walked in and put the books away. "Master," he went on to suggest, in an exultant manner, "there's no need for you to go yourself to see her. I'll go to her house and tell her that our old lady has something to ask of her. I can hire a carriage to bring her over, and then, in the presence of her venerable ladyship, she can be spoken to, and won't this way save a lot of trouble?" "Do you want to die?" speedily shouted Li Gui. "Mind, when you go back, whether right or wrong, I'll first give you a good bumping. And then go and report you to our master and mistress, and just tell them that it's you, and only you, who instigated Mr. Pao-yü. I've succeeded, after ever so much trouble, in coaxing them, and mending matters to a certain extent, and now you come again to continue a new plan. It's you who stirred up this row in the schoolroom, and not to speak of your finding, as would have been the proper course, some way of suppressing it, there you are, instead, still jumping into the fire." Ming Yen, at this juncture, could not muster the courage to utter a sound. By this time Chia Jui had also apprehended that if the row came to be beyond clearing up, he himself would likewise not be clear of blame, so that circumstances compelled him to pocket his grievances and to come and entreat Ch'in Chung as well as to make apologies to Pao Yü. These two young fellows would not at first listen to his advances, but Pao Yü at length explained that he would not go and report the occurrence, provided only Chin Jung admitted his being in the wrong. Chin Jung refused, at the outset, to agree to this, but he ultimately could find no way out of it, as Chia Jui himself urged him to make some temporizing apology. Li Gui and the others felt compelled to tender Chin Jung some good advice. "It's you," they said, "who have given rise to the disturbance, and if you don't act in this manner, how will the matter ever be brought to an end?" So that Chin Jung found it difficult to persist in his obstinacy, and was constrained to make a bow to Ch'in Chung. Pao Yü was, however, not yet satisfied, but would insist upon his knocking his head on the ground; and Chia Jui, whose sole aim was to temporarily smother the affair, quietly again urged Chin Jung, adding that the proverb has it, that if you keep down the anger of a minute you will for a whole lifetime feel no remorse. Whether Chin Jung complied or not to his advice is not known, but the following chapter will explain. End of Section 21.